Hi, I'm Stephen, and this is a podcast called Challenging Leadership. Welcome to the show, and my co-host is...
I'm Jared Scott.
Excellent, good. Right, okay, so it's my turn today, it's my theme today, and I've chosen the topic of technology and its effects on leadership. And I guess I got a bit sucked down the old AI rabbit hole in particular, so that's a really interesting area. But I do want to talk about technology a bit more widely. But I think, given that AI is on everybody's lips at the moment, we should spend a bit of time on that.
Sure, absolutely.
So I guess the first place to go really is I'm a bit older than you, so technology.
Just a little bit. Just a
little bit, just a decade. So I guess I've seen more changes in technology in the workplace. I mean, my career started a bit late, I guess, but I started my career about 30 and I joined an IT team. So I was kind of straight into technology when I really started to do my career seriously. And obviously that has massive impacts on the way that we do our jobs, and trying to think about how the effects that had and ongoing changes has on leadership is actually quite tricky. So I got a couple of research papers that I thought might be a useful kind of focus, but we can talk about anything obviously, but it's just a way of thinking about them. One's about technology in general, and particularly around HR, but obviously, managers worry about a lot of the HRE type stuff like recruiting, training, organizing employees, performance management, those sorts of things. So this paper that I'm looking at now, I'll put the link on the show notes if people want to access it. These are all open documents, so anybody can download them. This one's called The Influence of Technology on the Future of Human Resource Management by Stone, Deadrick, Lukaszewski and Richard Johnson. So maybe I just throw a few things at you and get your thoughts, and then because obviously we don't just be a monologue of me talking about this paper.
Sure.
So there's various different avenues that this paper looks at, and it talks about goals of human management or human resource management. One of the goals is to attract talent, a talented and diverse workforce, and another is choosing those. So let's lump those together. So recruitment and selection, I suppose. Technology has helped us with that. What's your experience of using technology to do those things?
It's interesting you bring that up because I was literally just reading an article on LinkedIn about it focused on AI, but actually even before that, I think about people turning in applications. It's become an easier process with technology. You can have QR codes. People can just drive by and pop it with their phone and pull it up and do it at their convenience. Whereas in the past, it used to be, well, you got to come in and actually sit down and fill out an application. And so some of that, I think there's benefits. Like, do you want people that are unwilling to stop their car and come in and sit down? You're finding out what type of person they are, but also when you make it convenient, I think you also get a wider range of people because you don't know what their circumstances are. But then getting into actually going through the information, it saves time because you can have AI or you can have software of any type look for like key things that you want to see in an application. But then you see articles where it's like, if you put these keywords in your resume, then you're bound to be selected.
That's right.
So it's like anytime you remove the human element, I think there's going to be a downside. You just got to weigh the cost. Is that there's an upside to technology sorting and organizing and looking for patterns and algorithms, but I think the human mind is always going to be superior in just noticing those little niche things that you just can't pick up on using software. Now, software may get to a point where it can pick up on those things, and that's scary, but
yeah, that's right. And that's really interesting insight, actually. And the paper suggests that, so this is a paper that is essentially a meta-analysis of lots of other pieces of work. So these are quite good meta-analyses because it gives you a bit of a rounded out view of the state of the science at the time. And it suggests that the data seems to suggest that when you're using electronic recruitment, like stuff on websites, and I mean these days that's the primary way. I mean, nobody uses any other method now. So I guess, and what it's done, it's increased your reach. So we now reach many more people. We have more people applying. But at the time, so this is going back about 8 years actually, at the time of this paper, there was no evidence to say that actually we were recruiting better, if you like. So it doesn't. So yes, it's more efficient. So it raises quite an interesting question actually that I hadn't thought of before, but I always like these types of questions. Is essentially, what is your goal? And the question is our goal to be more efficient or is our goal to be more effective? And the two might not be the same thing. And I think we can definitely say that recruitment has become more efficient. We're getting through greater numbers of applications where we're able to, as you say, perhaps use some technology to eliminate certain classes or groups of people that don't qualify for whatever reason. But does that make it more effective? And I'm not sure. Like you, I worry a little bit about the way that these processes have created a situation where, if you know how to game the system, you can get in front of people, and if you don't, you're constantly being rejected. And actually, you might be a really good candidate. It's just that you don't have the tricks. You don't know the words to use, specific words. And I think that's a shame. That's surely not what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. It's the other tough thing is you think about whether we want to or not. I think we all think that we don't have built-in biases, but we do, and those can even present themselves, unfortunately, in the market of hiring. I mean, you could just see someone slovenly dressed and say, "Nope, never going to do it," and you have no idea that was what they were dealing with that day, and they were just desperate for the job, and it had a tremendous amount of talent, or whatever it may be. Well, the one thing about using software, or if we wanted to say AI, AI can be set up where it's not looking at anything but the raw data. So it doesn't care. It doesn't care about all those other things. So it doesn't have feelings. And, so there's an upside maybe is that when they're sifting through things, because we're not supposed to look at people's background, race, religion, any of that stuff has nothing to do with the hiring process. It's not supposed to. But AI is something that can bypass those prejudices that exist, and also the biases.
Yeah, that's one of the claims, I suppose, that is a benefit of using technology. There's a couple of things I think that are quite interesting there. One is that there has been some research that's quite robust that suggests that biases do play a part, and when you remove any sort of markers, whether it be a name or where people come from, if you remove all of those, then you get a different result when people are sifting through CVs. So that suggests that we may have biases even though we might not realize it. The slight concern though is that things like AI and dumb systems, if you like, that are essentially just searching for keywords, they also though can reflect the biases of the society that created them. So this is one of the concerns about AI, is that essentially AI is a black box, that we don't know how the decisions are being made. So if it's trawling the internet and just scraping it for any data, then the biases and the unfairnesses and the injustices that are present in society as reflected in the internet will also be reflected by the AI itself. So there's
Mm.
some obvious examples, I suppose. So you might say in the UK we have basically a handful of universities and schools that seem to populate the great and the good. So if the last few prime ministers have all gone to Oxford University and either Westminster School or Eton, and that is staggering when you think about all the millions of people in the country, and yet we keep choosing from this small pool. So if you get an AI, let's say, to do the recruiting for prime minister, would it pick somebody like me, brought up in a council estate, or would it choose somebody like the people that we've had, because that's what we've had before? So yeah, there are dangers, I think, with believing that AI and technology can just remove those biases, because if it's in society, it's going to be present in those systems too. So you have to be slightly careful with that.
That's an interesting perspective as well. It's scary that I'm afraid to talk too much about AI, because my mind starts going in all these different directions, like, Space Odyssey. Remember where he's like, I decided I'm just going to shut down all the life pods, like it becomes cognizant of its existence.
Open the pod bay doors.
I know. Goodness.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah. There are real fears around AI. We need to get into AI, I think, on this discussion.
Sure.
Before we do, can I just also raise the question of learning? Because obviously that's something that we're both really interested in.
Yeah.
We're both trainers and coaches by trade, I would say. And in my lifetime, I've seen e-learning become much more dominant. And I have my own e-learning courses that I might as well do the advert now. Click on the link below to have a look at my courses that I deliver. They've been one of the top sellers on Udemy for quite some time, and we're now selling them directly. So have a look at those. But of course, what they are me using some graphics, sitting in front of a camera, talking about or teaching leadership and management skills. I give people exercises to do and things to have a go at, but it's all very one way. And that tends to be the way that e-learning goes. Obviously, another part of my job is to deliver courses in-house, and they are so different. I wonder what's your insights into the benefits or ups and downsides of e-learning.
Oh, goodness. Do we have time? No. I'm glad you brought this up. I remember when I first moved into a training department, we decided we're going to be instituting a new learning management system. This was in 2004.
Yep.
And it was kind of cool at the time, but there was huge resistance to it, especially at that time, because all training needed to be in person, right? And one of the things that we went to, and this was higher ups can go, we want to save money, and it's just better. No one has to travel anywhere. We can just push these courses out into the LMS, and you log in and you sit down at your desk, and then a week later, now you're a qualified engineer, or you're a qualified salesperson, or whatever it is you're trying to qualify them in. Because, hey, they watched it, they're good. You have little quizzes to test the knowledge. And we found that the e-learning was good for some things, but then other things, it was not good. This took several years to figure this out. And so what it turned into was adopting a philosophy of, we'll call it blended learning, where you would have some things that this has to be done in person. You need to be there to do this, to touch it and to feel it. The product and things like that. But e-learning also, I feel like that if it's a terrible course to start with in person, it's going to be made much worse once it's on the computer screen. So it really put pressure on the team that's creating this training. It has to be above and beyond anything that you would have done in the classroom, because you can't adjust or adapt. Like you've probably had to do that. You see the class has this look on their face oh, they're not getting it, so I've got to
Yeah,
change gears.
yeah,
And you can't change gears with an e-learning. You get what you get. There's just a left and a right button. And so, yeah, I think that it has its place now. If we shift forward to recent times with the problem with COVID and creating an environment where we had to learn remotely,
mm,
e-learning became super beneficial, but also we found that it needed to be supplemented with, we'll call them webinars, like you and I are talking.
yeah,
We're thousands of kilometers away from each other, and yet we can act like we're in the same room. And so with the advent of more use of that, I think it helped balance things out a little bit. But we still rely on in-person training. But that's my take on it. E-learnings, they're
yeah.
great, but they need to be for the right thing. They can't go with everything.
Yeah, and I think that reflects actually really well the general movement. I think in industry in general, that seems to be the way that most organisations have gone. It's taken us some time, but yeah, like you, I remember when e-learning was going to basically remove all the needs for any training rooms or trainers, and for a while it seemed that that was the case. But it was so obvious to me that the experience. Of e-learning, and often that they're not even somebody talking like on my courses, so at least you get the feeling that you've got a human being
Mhm.
there you're talking to. But often these e-learning platforms are just screens with text on, and you've either got to click a button or you've got to drag and drop something into a thing, and that's as much interaction as you're getting.
That's
um,
right.
I
That's right.
guess one of the benefits that is often seen in that is that you can the program can be smart in that it can actually you can tailor it to each individual learner, so they only need to learn the bits that they they need. The type of training I've often done sometimes gets described as sheep dip training, and it's seen as a bad thing. And I've grappled with this for a long time, because a lot of the courses that I've delivered for organisations have been essentially, this is a course about leadership and management, or this is a course about lean manufacturing, and these are the course contents, these are the learning objectives. You come with the course and you get the same course that everybody else gets. And for a while there was a lot of criticism about that type of training because it's seen as sheep dip training. Everybody
Mhm.
gets the same thing. All the sheep
Mhm.
just get dipped into the sheep dip. Um, and I think, yeah, like you said already, I think there's a place for that sort of thing, and then there's a place for much more targeted. So blended learning is the way forward, definitely, and it's the way we should do it. Horses for courses. I'll come back to that phrase
Okay.
that we talked about before. Yeah, what the things that are teachable, if you like, through e-learning. Let's do that. There's also room for, okay, we'll call it sheep dipping. There's a reason why farmers dip sheep the way they do. It's because they all need to be free from the pests.
That's right.
So they dip them in the solution to make sure that all of the sheep are protected. So there is a reason why sometimes we need to deliver the same program to all leaders, let's say.
Mhm.
And we
Mhm.
can talk about culture and behavior and how cultural norms get created, but that's a part of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're right. It's really about targeting. It's about understanding what is the right medium for it.
Yeah. I have a question for you. Do you
Mm.
think that technology or e-learnings has created an environment where educators or us that are teaching become lazy? Like it supplements things. And I'll use it for instance. So one of my mentors when I was growing up in the training realm, he handed me a dry erase marker, and he said, "You can't use PowerPoint. You can't use anything." I says, "You have to be able to teach this class everything, and all you
Yeah,
have is your mouth and your pen. And if you can't draw it and explain it, then you don't know it." And I've always used that, but I'm like now, the webinar, I can put my notes down here. Like I have some notes right now that I'm glancing at, and I can, nobody knows that I'm doing that. And you can say, oh, he
mm.
has such a pleasant voice and he's such a great teacher. And I'm just reading great stuff that I got from the internet. It's like, so I just wonder, what do you think about
Mm.
that? Do you think that that's lowered the quality of teaching, or anyway, just some
Yeah.
thoughts?
Um, it's really interesting. I've tried that myself, and I do that myself. Sometimes I think, do I need PowerPoint actually? Can I do everything? I'm a big flip chart fan.
Hmm.
So I love a flip chart, and just standing next to the flip chart and just getting a conversation going and getting input from the group. So I use the Socratic method with training. So it's lots of asking questions. What's your experience of this, and why do we do this, and what's the danger with that? And so people are constantly, it's a two-way discussion, which again you cannot get on an e-learning platform. But you don't really need PowerPoint for that. These days I do use PowerPoint because it's just the easiest thing to do, in terms of, if I've got 4 questions that I want to ask people, then I'll just put them on a slide.
Yeah.
But I could do that just as easily, and I have done, with a flip chart and Peifer. So, but the answer to your question is yes, I do think it has made us lazy,
Hmm.
or it has the potential to make us lazy, and it also, I think it isn't the best way to teach. So what we all know, we've all heard of death by PowerPoint, and this tends to happen when people have 20 bullet points on each slide, and essentially they just read from each bullet point. So we're sat there watching this trainer or this speaker read each bullet point out as it comes up, and you're wondering how many more bullet points, and you're looking at the space there is, and you think there could be at least another 10 more bullet points there,
Oh,
and
it's
it's
brutal.
just like, you just want to die, don't you? Just
Hmm.
so dull. And I'm afraid some trainers are like that. So
Yeah.
it there is a temptation for PowerPoint to actually take away from your training. So I do a couple of things. One of the things is, I'm sure you know this, but a little tip for people who don't: on PowerPoint, if you're on the display mode, if you're doing a presentation mode, if you just press the B key, the key on your keyboard, B, it just blanks it out. So
Hmm.
when I'm not using it, I'll blank it out, so that, and you notice everybody's attention straight away goes back onto you as the trainer.
Right.
You can then ask them questions, you can look them in the eye. As soon as you put that screen back on, they stop looking at you and they're looking at the screen. We are transfixed by those screens. So yeah, I think that there are real risks around that, and it is technology, of course. Yeah,
Yeah, I've got a cheat code. I've got a remote that has a button on that
yeah,
blanks the screen because
yeah,
yeah, I love doing that. I'm glad to hear that it's being done other places too. That's good.
yeah. But technology. It's a good example, really, of technology actually um, grabbing hold of something and changing the nature of it entirely without
Hmm.
us actually knowing. I often say, when somebody says, can you send me the presentation? I think to myself, I can't send you I can send you the slides to the
Yeah.
presentation. That is not the presentation. The
Oh,
presentation is me standing up there delivering it.
yeah. Yeah, I know. I had some people that were very disappointed. They wanted the presentation. I'm like,
Mm,
well, here you go. Here's the slides. They're like, there's nothing in there, and I'm like, yeah, I just have pictures. I was like, because
yeah.
it's again, we always use the example of like seasonings. PowerPoint seasons what you should
Mm,
already know and be able to
yeah.
explain. So
Yeah,
there, I guess, is
absolutely.
an example of technology being used properly, but it has its limits because it could also be really bad. Like I
Yeah.
know we both participated in some really bad where you're like, I guess he thinks I can't read, and so
Yeah.
he's just gonna read every point.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I could do that myself. I really don't
Yeah,
need you to be reading that
that's
information.
right.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot more could be said about that, but let's get on to the question of AI. I
Yes.
also want to touch on VR as well, virtual reality.
Yeah.
I texted you before this,
Hmm.
to ask if you had used it, because I thought we might maybe do an episode, because I've got an Oculus Quest, or a Meta Quest as it's called now.
Yeah.
So that's a VR environment, and I have played around a little bit with it in terms of using it for work.
Hmm.
As yet, I'm still unconvinced, actually,
Hmm.
about them. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Let's cover that one first.
Sure. Well, I remember this is a few years ago. We had a company come in and they said, "Here, we're going to put these headsets on, and we're all going to sit around, and it's like we could be conferencing with each other." And So I put it on and I'm looking around and you see avatars
Yeah.
of your coworkers and like, this person could be in France and this person could be
Mm.
in Brazil and so on and so forth. And I guess it was just such a new experience. It was a little bit of information overload, but
Mm.
at the same time, it was more like, but this isn't what humans really are, or what they. It was just weird. It was
Mm.
goofy, and you know what? I think that maybe that's the generational thing with me, where I'm maybe stuck in a area because just to play to the point that there are people that like it. We did a little career fair at a school, and the booth next to us, it was two ladies that worked for a hospital system, and they had those headsets, and the kids were loving it. Like they were. It was basically how the doctors could perform virtual surgeries
Right.
in the
Right.
future, not doing it now, but
Mm.
it was like, wow, it just captured their attention. I'm like, that's kind of cool. It's like, but I immediately went to all the downsides. I was like, what if the battery dies in the middle of heart surgery? But anyway, I don't know. I mean, I think that again, it's just like there were probably people that were naysayers over the Model T, saying, I love my horse. It doesn't need gas. It just needs some oats.
That's right. Yeah.
And so anyway, that's
Yeah. It's
where I'm at with that.
but I so I'm a big fan of the idea of it. So I'm very excited by the idea that you can put a headset on and be in another world while you're still in your room.
Hmm.
I think that's very exciting. It's very futuristic. I've always been interested in future technologies, and I'm excited by it. Um, but I have to say, I'm really struggling
Mm.
to understand and identify the benefit of it for the workplace. So in fact, on this YouTube channel, I've actually got a YouTube um, explainer how to set up your Oculus Quest and do it in the workplace. So I've actually set up that. So if you're interested in it, have a look at that video. But
Sure.
what you're left with is you're left with a virtual office or a virtual training room. So there's various different pieces of software, different apps that you can use. Obviously, Meta has its own, and you can use that, but there's others as well, and they all offer the same sort of thing. So you can be sitting in a virtual auditorium or standing in a virtual auditorium with my. So I've done it. I've stood there in a virtual auditorium with my presentation there in front of the imagined people. I've never actually done it live, but then I think to myself, why is this better
Hmm.
than having a Zoom meeting like we already do, or what Teams or whatever technology we've got? We've actually got real people sat in front of us. It's two-dimensional, true, but you're actually looking at real people. Whereas what we're doing at the moment is we've got still quite an uncomfortable headset on, which only lasts about half an hour or an hour of continuous use, um, and it is still quite blocky. It's still low res and clunky. So yeah, but even if we got it to be really really good, you're still asking the question, what's the benefit? And
Hmm.
I'm struggling to answer that question. I want to answer it.
Sure.
I'm struggling to.
Well, let me ask you this: have you does that tie in the VR field with augmented reality? So we do use augmented reality technology. Some of the stuff that we deal with is just too immense to. You can't just carry something like that into the classroom. So you can kind of you have to, everybody has to have the technology. There's the downside. Otherwise, it
Mm,
doesn't present. But if you do have everybody with that program, they can pull it up on their device and actually hold their phone up. Let's just say to a conveyor, and they can see the product on that conveyor
right.
rather
Yeah.
than what they currently have. So it kind of helps people that don't have an imagination, And I think maybe I feel like I'm a very creative thinker and an imaginative person, so I don't need technology to picture something. But for some people, they need that. So maybe that's where it could be of a
Yeah,
benefit.
I
Whereas,
can definitely see that. I think for sales, possibly yes.
mhm,
Um, I I think for training, it's going to have to be so um, so high quality, so high resolution that it really does feel like you are actually there to get any benefits from it. If we're talking about delivering training, so
Or,
I've dabbled, and I'd like to do more. And if any listeners want to meet me virtually and have a go, then we can do. And I'm quite keen to sort of follow up. Apple are threatening to bring in their own device, which is going to be $3,000 or something, I believe, as a price point. So that's really only professionals are going to be able to afford that. And I think that's a bit more of an augmented reality type headset. But again, how comfortable is it? How long does it last on a charge? And it feels like a solution to a problem that hasn't been identified yet.
yeah, well, it's just like the e-learning problem. If it's not good, it's gonna make it even worse.
Yeah,
You imagine. I mean, just teaching a software class. If one student doesn't have their software downloaded, I'll say, "Oh, sorry, let's stop, get you
can you
caught up."
imagine
You know what I'm talking about? It's like,
it?
it's like just that simple thing, and I'm like, okay, now we're gonna say, no, you have to have this headset on and everything, and so it'll be there, and I think in its own time and place in the future, but maybe now is not the time. You got to be able to replace what you have with something better, and if that's not the case, then why do it?
Yeah, totally agree. I feel like it's pretty. I believe it's dead. I could be wrong, So I'd be really happy to be wrong, because I love it as a concept. It just doesn't work. It's a bit like 3D movies,
Yeah.
They sounds great, but when you're sitting there with these silly glasses on and it doesn't quite look right, and it's a bit dark, you start to realize.
I refuse to go to 3D movies. I just can't do it. I'm like, I want to go see the 2D one.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get on to AI then. We've been
let's do it
all this time. What's your knowledge around AI at the minute? What are your thoughts?
So I'm in love with AI. I absolutely.
Well, there's a film about that. It's called She, isn't it?
That's right. There is. Well, not quite like that. It's not. I'm not romanticizing AI or chatbot GT or whatever. But where I found it to be helpful is that I use it to save time when it comes to maybe building a skeleton of something. So, or learning. To me, it's more of a more useful Wikipedia. And with that being said, I can go down a rabbit hole of you got to make sure the information is verifiable and it's accurate, because obviously it could put out some erroneous information. However, just giving you basic ideas, like I'll give you a couple of for instances. Working on a new course for next year, and it's a subject that I don't know anything about. And so I said, what would a course look like? And this is what I put in there. I said, what would a course look like for this subject? I'll keep it anonymous, but it says for somebody that doesn't know anything about it. I says, and make this course the appropriate length so that there would be, I put in all this stuff like just talking to a person, and within seconds it spit out a 3-day outline of everything you should cover. And then I took those, and that gave me basically the points to research and to learn on. Whereas before I'm like, you don't know what to ask if you don't know anything. And I think that's where I found it to be a big time saver, because the way my mind works, I'm chasing after the bear and I found the mice, and so it's helpful to give me a concentrated effort with research. It's helpful with analyzing data, but I'm very leery of it from a leadership standpoint, because I feel like that, again, it doesn't have the human touch. And I think the way that I would illustrate it is I've got a football illustration, but this time I hate to disappoint you, it's going to be an American football illustration.
Okay.
But maybe you can
learn more about it.
Yeah, maybe they do the same thing with the Europe League and all that, or the Premier League, but they analyze data and they say on this particular situation on the field or the pitch, this is the play they should run. And they have actual AI telling them. I mean, they'll pull it up on the screen. The sportscasters, they'll say, "Yep, on this time, this has a 98% chance of succeeding."
Wow.
And it's just amazing that they've gotten down to where they can analyze all this information. Here's the problem with that, is that it doesn't sometimes factor in, well, what's the weather look like? Is the field slippery? Is the starting player, the star player, playing, or is he out, or is another person out? Whereas a real live human being coach, they know we don't have this person and they know how to run this play perfectly, so we can't run this play. It's not, again, it's just, I think that kind of illustrates where I'm going at when you're dealing with personnel issues or you're trying to see what's going to be the most effective way to deal with something. Just because the numbers say this, because of all the AI data, doesn't mean that that's really what is going to lead to success. So,
yeah, I suppose though. An enthusiast would say, an enthusiast of AI would say that's just a case of more variables than the software currently is able to take account of. And that's because either we're not feeding that information into the system, or it's just currently not sophisticated enough to be able to take account of all those variables. But in principle, if you can feed all the variables in of a football match, with who's playing, did they have a rough night last night? You could, in theory, have all that information. That's the AI could observe the body language of each of the players to see whether they looked like they normally do, or maybe they looked a bit hungover, one of them, or looked a bit. Even their mental state, it would be able to tell. So that could account for those kind of variables, and then obviously the size of the crowd, even, and the weather, and all of those things could be accounted for.
Yeah. What do you think that maybe what Leeds' problem is they need AI? I don't know, or maybe they need a Ted Lasso style coach. That's what they need to bring.
We're definitely going to do a Ted Lasso episode. Jared, we've started to watch the series again because you said about it. So yeah, we need to hold our fire for the Ted Lasso stuff. Okay. But I'm telling you, I'm well up for a Ted Lasso episode.
But you do bring a good point up with AI. It's as good as the information that you give it, and that's one of the things I've had to learn is, if you don't refine what you say, then it's very binary. You get what you put into it. But I still love it. I think that it has a lot of use.
Yeah, I mean that's I suppose using ChatGPT and for trainers. I mean, it has the potential to revolutionize what we do. I haven't used it for developing training courses. I've dabbled a little bit. Interestingly, the last episode that was released, which will be a couple back from you if you're watching this, was about the Star Trek captains and leaders. And I was looking for a kind of witty theme for the podcast. So I actually got ChatGPT on and asked it to come up with a title or a theme for a podcast about leadership in Star Trek. It didn't just do that. It gave me a whole concept around doing a whole podcast about Star Trek and leadership in Star Trek, which was absolutely brilliant. I thought, do you know what? I could do this. This sounds great. Yeah. So yeah, it is staggering. So these are these large language models that essentially they're really, really sophisticated what predictive text, aren't they? Essentially, that's what they're doing. They're looking at what word comes next, based on the internet, the words on in the internet, which is fascinating. I can see AI, and the paper that I'm taking some of this from, I will just mention it, is a paper. It's actually really interesting. It's 2022, so this is much more up to date, by Peifer, Tim Jeske, and Sven Hille. It's called Artificial Intelligence and its Impact on Leaders and Leadership. So I recommend it. It's a short piece, and it's not obviously giving you anything unbelievably shocking, but it is asking some questions which I think are quite useful. So it groups these 4 areas: strategic transformation process. So think about AI, not large language models now, but AI as a kind of colleague, if you like, making decisions about transformation and change. So we've had a podcast about change. Imagine if AI was planning the change. Qualification and competencies. So this is to do with whether we as leaders are able to understand and I suppose if you think in chat GPT, it's asking the right questions. Culture and human AI interaction. So it looks at these 4 areas, which I think is quite interesting. But it seems to be saying, so this again, a bit like the e-learning stuff, there's certain things that AI is going to be really good at, but then there's other things like those interactions with your team, doing one-to-ones. Performance management is quite an interesting area, and that's something, again, technology it can in theory help with. But how far do we as leaders want to, how far will we need to hand over some of our responsibilities and activities? And that's the bit, I suppose, that is unknown. But I can see a lot of I work in the food industry a lot, and scheduling is a really important part of. Generally, these businesses have quite a big planning department, and they're planning what's going to go on the lines. You might have multiple production lines, and you've got lots of different orders. The orders come in over the wire, and you then have to make it that day. But you really need to forecast what sorts of things are going to be coming down that wire. So there is a forecasting system as well. And I can see all of that being done by AI much better.
Sure. No, I agree. But then to me, what I worry about is we become so dependent on AI that we all become dumb.
Yeah.
And that worries me. And also, obviously, there's resistance to change. That's just how we are as people. But the thing as a leader, you're supposed to keep your team together.
Yeah.
You're supposed to keep your department together, whoever it is that you're overseeing or managing, and you don't want people to be left behind. So I think as people adopt AI, it's important that they do so at a pace where everybody can move along with the train, as it were. You don't want to leave a cart behind at the station, and that I'm not much of a, well, either get with it or get left, and I'm like, I don't like that philosophy, because you have some very valuable people that they just are resistant to that, and it's like you don't want to lose that experience that they have, because you can't really. Some people say you can teach experience, and I'm like, you have to live it, and
Yeah.
lose that aspect of it. So there's just some thoughts with it. It's a balance.
Yeah, I suppose we don't know the world that this is going to create. I'm by nature, by experience, I guess, skeptical about some of the grander claims. I think large language models they are so shocking. The ability for these things to create convincing looking text and argumentation, that I think that's made everybody sit up and listen harder and look harder at this technology. And I think it's easy for us to become a little alarmed at what's coming next, but I'm skeptical that we're on the verge of the singularity anytime soon, because the large language models work because they are, as I said, essentially a big fancy predictive text machine, and all they're doing is they're looking at correlations when words sit together in certain contexts. Fantastic! It's an absolutely amazing piece of technology, and what an achievement! But they're not. I don't believe that they're intelligent. They don't know what they're doing. They don't understand anything that they're writing.
Yeah.
So I don't fear that, not in the short term. I guess the explosion of tools that could essentially make most of our jobs obsolete, or most of us obsolete. That's the bit that I think is concerning, and I don't think as a society we have any way of coping with that.
Mhm.
I just don't know how societies that are built upon going to work, earning money, paying taxes. I just don't see how that copes with 90% of all jobs disappearing.
Mm. Yeah, that's the part. Yeah, that's scary. You got this move towards chatbots and virtual assistants. You remember the little paper clip that would pop up on
So
Microsoft?
yeah,
Oh, I hated that thing. And
how
now
annoying.
these chatbots that pop up, or
Mm,
you go to get service done on my vehicle, and I go to the website, and it's like, hey, how can I help you? And I'm like, I don't want to talk to you. I know what I need. I
yeah.
just I just want to get it scheduled, and you got to go through the whole because it's so programmed. It's
Mm.
like you can't even get to the end step. It's like the 10 tones you have to hit on your phone to get through
Oh
to a
no.
live person.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, we got these virtual assistants down. I'm like, they're still crap. I don't want any of that.
Well, this is my argument. They basically answer only the things that you could read on the FAQ
That's
page,
right.
and you think, well, I've read that
That's
already, and
right.
so all they're doing is basically telling you to go and read this thing that you've already read.
That's
Yeah, it's very frustrating. I mean, maybe we should do another episode on customer service, because this is
mm,
one of my grumpy old man,
mm,
moments. I think customer service is absolutely shocking these days, and I think that AI isn't helping. It potentially it could help, but it's not currently, and it
no.
shows no sign of actually being of any use to the customer.
Mm.
It's good for the organization who think they've got a solution that means they can employ fewer people. But as a customer, the experience is absolutely shocking.
Yeah, yeah. It's probably. I think that all the higher ups probably say AI save money.
Yeah.
That's at the end of the day, saving money is music to their ears. But I'm
Mm.
like, you'll lose money because you're going to have dissatisfied people that don't want your product anymore.
Yeah.
So it's. I think it could produce. Maybe it's like this is the latest thing, and we're going to have some digital fatigue. Um, People are going to be overloaded with everything, and then I worry: is it going to create even shorter attention spans? Because goodness, it's tough now just to keep people's attention because
Mm.
you got things like TikTok and others where
Mm.
the videos they're interesting sometimes, but it's like in little snippets where
Yeah.
back in the day you could sit through a lecture and be like, oh, I can handle this, and now
Yeah.
you got to engage the audience every few minutes, or otherwise they're glossed over, or they're looking at their
Yeah. You do wonder if this is, yeah. I mean, we're starting to sound like two old men
Well, I mean, I
shouting
kind of feel
at the
that
wind.
way. Filthy old men discuss AI.
Yeah,
That's what the new
yeah.
title will be for this.
Back in my day, yeah,
Back-
but I'm not like that, because I actually
no.
am very enthusiastic and very excited about new technology, but we
Yeah.
have to use it in the right way. The problem is that because of our the system that we use to govern ourselves, and which has been very successful in the
Mm,
Western world, if you like, over the last 100 years of capitalism, sales, innovation, in order to be the best, get more customers, and you're more profitable, which means you can invest further and so on. This has been a pretty successful way of bringing lots of people out of poverty, and so we all have a higher standard of living than we used to do, going back hundreds of years.
yeah.
However, I wonder whether unfettered, this could be not necessarily particularly useful for this next iteration of technology. So we've got
Mhm,
um, technology giants, a handful of them essentially.
mhm,
A handful of people deciding on the future of work and of our lives, and
yeah.
they're not really, they are just normal people with very few qualifications in terms of ethics or
Mhm.
so we're at the mercy of the Elon Musks and the Mark Zuckerbergs of this world, and
Yeah, this is
um,
true.
it's kind of frightening because they don't really have to. They don't have to answer to anybody really. They're so wealthy and have such dominance in the marketplace that these handful of people have such a sway on what the next 20 years is going to be like.
Hmm. Well, that's scary, but not to go back to our previous episode. But I had this thought about how does AI handle the Kobayashi Marus of life?
Yes.
Like to me, the human element's always going to be superior, but then it's scary because of the fact that I think that it'll be tried to be utilized with things that it's like that's not really what you need people in there, but the human element is going to almost feel like it's taking a back seat to AI eventually, and that's what's scary to me is because we as a race, as a species, we're successful because of our abilities to work together. So I hope AI can help us to work together, but not replace us. If
Yeah.
that would be the.
Yeah, better at doing the things that computers already do.
Mhm.
So, as I say, things like planning and scheduling and making decisions, or at least aiding in the decision making process in terms of should we do this or should we do that, given the market conditions, these
Mhm.
sorts of things. I can definitely see AI being a real advantage. But yeah, making decisions about who lives or dies, for instance. This is only a matter of time before doctors have to make these choices around how
Yeah,
much money they spend of their budget on certain things.
yeah.
And yeah, this will, I think, almost certainly be a task that is given to AI. So AI will now be deciding, should we invest in this drug or should we invest in that drug? Um, which medical procedures are going to give us the best outcomes,
Hmm.
and it will
Yeah,
be done in a very cold, calculating way.
yeah.
That is, yeah,
Who gets hospice care and who gets the actual heart transplant?
exactly,
And that's where it gets scary.
yeah,
Because it could be right, but I'm like, when you lose AI doesn't have compassion,
that's right,
AI doesn't have empathy, and
yeah,
those are two huge qualities that leadership needs. So,
yeah. And if you just think about, I know we're two people that are not experts in this particular field, so maybe I'm saying things that are foolish, but I've always wondered. So I've always been skeptical about self-driving cars. I think I can imagine self-driving cars on the highway, or motorways as we call them, multi-lanes motorways, which are pretty straight with no traffic lights or roundabouts as we have, but they're not on motorways. So you can imagine those sorts of roads. I can see self-driving cars for that. Um, but the sorts of roads that we have in the UK and I'm guessing around the world, with roadworks everywhere and people doing all sorts of silly things, that there is no way that will get to self-driving cars.
yeah.
I
How's
just
it going to
do
work when you're taking the countryside loop in Ireland and there's a
exactly, yeah,
sheep farmer and
exactly.
the road's wide enough for half of your car and you've got two cars on it
Exactly,
and
exactly.
the
So,
stone walls on the side. Gives
and
me anxiety.
our roads are in a terrible state. So they've always got roadworks, and that then they'll put a temporary contraflow up, which means you're driving on the wrong side of the road now for a
Mm,
while. And yeah, it's just going to be unbelievably difficult. Again, you might say that these are just variables that, in theory, um, could be worked out, but I simply think it's beyond the pale. But also the question I've always wondered, and maybe one of our listeners can educate me on this one. Um, but I can imagine in the city or in built up areas, essentially these cars just grinding to a halt because all you need to do as pedestrians is just step out in front of it and just walk where you want to walk. And
Mhm.
unless the car has been programmed to actually run people over, which I can't believe it will, the car will stop because it will have tried to avoid running someone over. So what's to stop cars in the city just essentially just all grinding to a halt as pedestrians just walk in front of them
Yeah.
and ignore the traffic?
Yeah, or carjacking. Someone's trying to stop you,
Yeah.
and you're like, I can. At that point, I have permission to run over them, but the car is not going to let me.
This is it.
Sounds awful, but it's like
Yeah.
so many different things with that. Or they say, well, deaths have been reduced by 50%, but imagine saying, but all deaths are the result of failure of self-driving cars. That's
Yeah.
where you get into because it goes back to our thought of wanting to have control. That's a whole nother rabbit hole, Stephen.
Yeah, well, I think
Well,
leadership is about is a human activity. So I suppose
Mhm.
to bring the conversation to a bit of a close, my assertion here is that leadership is absolutely a human skill and activity. Management, on the other hand, I can imagine. I'm happy to allow some AI into that, where it's just about moving your resources into the right place at the right time. Fine, but when it comes
Yeah,
to leadership, that's a human activity.
that's right. Just leverage the technology for the
Yeah,
benefits of what you need for specific things, but
yeah.
you still have to have that leadership in the human aspect.
And the final word, there has to be with a human being, I think. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Okay. Good. Oh, well, that was an interesting conversation. Thank you, Joe.
it was. It was. I like dealing with that a little bit. That's good.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, good. Well, listeners, thank you very much for listening to this podcast. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. And if you're on a podcast app, then do whatever you have to do. They're all different. So you might have to follow it or subscribe or whatever you need to do so that you get this podcast dropping into your inbox every fortnight, every 2 weeks. New ones come out. I mentioned before about my courses. If you want to take advantage of the courses, then click on the link below if you're on YouTube again. And I think there will be in the show notes as well. So, if you're interested in those courses, please avail yourself. Until next fortnight, thank you very much and see you again soon. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.